At Thanksgiving dinner, the room went silent when my younger brother stood up, pointed at me, and declared, "I'm the real son. He's just the adopted one." He said it like I was a stranger, like 2 decades of memories meant nothing. But what shattered me most wasn't his words. It was the silence from my parents. No defense, no outrage, just silence. And in that moment, something inside me broke. So I got up, walked away, and started telling the story they never had the courage to share. If you've ever been blindsided by the people you called family, if silence ever cut deeper than betrayal, stick around. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about truth, healing, and finally choosing yourself. Don't forget to like, share, and tell me your thoughts below. I used to believe family meant unconditional love. I clung to that belief like a raft in a storm, especially because I was adopted. My parents, Diane and Mark, had taken me in when I was just 3 months old. They told me from the very beginning that I was chosen, that they loved me as their own. And for the longest time, I believed them. My childhood wasn't perfect, but it was full of the little things that made it feel like home. Saturday morning pancakes with my dad, late night homework help from my mom, Christmas photos where I was always in the middle, like the center of their world. Then, when I was 11, they had a baby, my younger brother Evan. Everyone called him their miracle baby, since doctors had told my mom she couldn't conceive. His arrival changed everything. Suddenly, the house that once felt like it was built around me started to shift. I went from being the chosen one to being the older one. Not neglected exactly, just less visible. At first, I didn't mind. Evan was cute, and I was old enough to understand that babies needed more attention. I helped out, read him stories, even rocked him to sleep when my parents were exhausted. I told myself this was just another way to be a good son, a good big brother. But over time, things started to feel unbalanced. My school awards hung on the fridge for a few days. Evan's drawings stayed up for months. I made the varsity soccer team. They missed the game because Evan had a stomach bug. I got accepted into my dream college, and my mom cried because Evan didn't get the part in a school play. I kept making excuses for them. They're just tired. They're trying their best. They love me. They're just busy. I buried the sting deep, smiled through it, and did what I'd always done, earn their love. But then came the subtle things. Like the way they started saying Evan looked just like Dad, while ignoring the fact that I didn't. Or how, at family gatherings, relatives would joke, "Well, Evan's the real Jones," and everyone would laugh. Except me. Once, during a casual dinner, Evan said, "I'm the only real son," and my parents chuckled. My mom even added, "Don't tease your brother." But she never corrected him. I tried to brush it off, tried to remind myself that love wasn't measured in DNA, that adoption didn't make me less. But those little cuts added up. College became my escape. I studied hard, graduated with honors, got a solid job, and moved out. I didn't come home much, just the big holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays. That year, Thanksgiving felt different from the start. I'd just broken up with someone I really cared about, and I was emotionally raw. Still, I made the drive back home. I even stopped to get my mom her favorite pie from that tiny bakery she loved. When I arrived, Evan greeted me at the door. He was 20 now, taller than me, broader, confident in a way that bordered on smug. He barely hugged me before heading back to his phone. Dinner was set beautifully, as always. My mom had gone all out. Turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, cranberry sauce, the works. The table was filled with extended family, and as we all sat down, I told myself to be grateful, to focus on the good. But somewhere between the sweet potatoes and the pumpkin pie, the conversation shifted. My uncle made an innocent comment about how Evan and I were so different. And that's when Evan stood up, smirking, glass in hand, and said, "Well, that's because I'm the real son. He's adopted." He said it loud enough that the whole table went quiet. I looked at my parents, expecting shock, anger, at the very least, a correction. But they just sat there, frozen. No one said a word. I waited for my mom to defend me, for my dad to scold him, for someone to laugh and say, "Evan, don't be a jerk." Nothing. The silence was deafening. That's when something snapped. Not because I didn't know I was adopted. I'd always known. But because in that moment I realized they didn't see me as theirs anymore. Maybe they never really had. So I stood up, pushed back my chair, and walked out of that house, not knowing if I'd ever come back. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Because something else had awakened inside me. A need for answers. A need for truth. And maybe, just maybe, a need for revenge. I didn't go far that night. Just parked my car a few blocks away from the house, engine off, hands still trembling on the steering wheel. The night was cold, but I couldn't feel it. All I could feel was the echo of that silence, my parents' silence, playing over and over in my head like a cruel joke. For 26 years, I had lived as their son, their firstborn, their so-called chosen child. And all it took to erase that was one sentence, a smug voice and a family too comfortable with letting it hang in the air. I stared out into the dark, and for the first time in my life, I didn't know where I belonged. I should have driven home. But instead, I drove to a motel just outside town. I needed space, air, anything that wasn't wrapped in that house of polite betrayals. I didn't sleep much. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, playing back every moment I'd once thought of as love, and now questioned if it had just been obligation, or performance, or guilt. But it wasn't until the next morning that the real unraveling began. I called my godmother, Carla. She wasn't blood, but she'd been close to my mom since college. She was always kind to me growing up, brought gifts no one asked for, remembered things my parents forgot. She lived 2 towns over and answered on the first ring. I didn't even know what I meant to say. I just mumbled something like, "Do you remember when I was adopted?" There was a pause, then a long sigh, and she said something I'll never forget. "I always wondered when you'd start asking questions. You deserve to know the whole story." I drove to her house that same afternoon. She had tea waiting. No hugs, no small talk, just a look that said, "This might hurt, but I'll hold you through it." And then she told me everything. My parents hadn't chosen me in the way they'd always described. I wasn't some miracle match from a hopeful adoption agency. No, I had been a last-minute placement after their first adoption had fallen through. They were devastated at the time, she said. Emotionally drained, desperate for a baby. When the agency offered me, hours after another couple had backed out, they said yes without even seeing a picture. They named me before they held me. They staged a photo shoot before they read my file. I wasn't chosen, I was available. Then came the kicker. They almost gave me back. Carla hesitated before saying it, but I begged her to finish. Apparently, when I was 4 months old, I got sick, really sick. My parents panicked. My mom started talking about how maybe the universe was trying to tell them something. They called the agency, asked about options. Carla was there that night. She told them if they gave me up, they'd regret it for the rest of their lives. And that's when my mom broke down and said something Carla never forgot. "He doesn't even look like us. It already feels temporary." They kept me, raised me, celebrated birthdays, paid for college, said "I love you" hundreds of times. But now I had to ask myself, did they ever truly mean it? Or did they just settle into the idea of me until Evan came along? I thanked Carla, hugged her tight, and walked out into the cold afternoon feeling like the ground beneath me had shifted permanently. And that's when something inside me changed. Grief had always been a quiet companion in my life, lingering just under the surface. But now, it was something else. It had a name, it had a cause, and it wanted justice. I didn't want revenge just for what Evan said. I wanted revenge for every moment I had swallowed my feelings. Every time I told myself I was being too sensitive. Every time I defended their love in conversations they never even heard. But I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted something deeper. I wanted the truth to come out. And I wanted them to feel what I had felt. Ignored, undervalued, unwanted. I started digging. I requested my full adoption file from the agency, not the glossy summary my parents had saved in a scrapbook, but the real one. It took 2 weeks to get it. 2 weeks of restless nights, circling memories, and watching childhood home videos on mute. When the file arrived, it came in a large envelope, thick with photocopies and handwritten notes. I sat on my apartment floor and read every page. My birth mother had been 17. No father listed. No extended family willing to take me in. But there was a note from the social worker. Child shows strong attachment response, smiles when held, calms when spoken to. I cried when I read that. Not because it was sweet, but because it reminded me that I came into this world ready to love, ready to connect. And yet the people who raised me, they had built a home around a version of me they never fully accepted. That was when the plan began to form. Not a scheme, not sabotage, something quieter, more strategic, a way to tell my story, not just to the world, but to them, so they could no longer pretend, so Evan couldn't laugh, so silence was no longer an option. I didn't want their apologies. I wanted them to sit with what they had done. Because the boy they almost gave back, he was about to show them what it really meant, to be a son. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to throw a fit, burn bridges, or post some angry tell-all on Facebook. That wasn't me. And besides, that would only feed their narrative, the dramatic, overly sensitive adopted kid. No, I wanted something smarter, sharper. I wanted them to hear the truth in my silence, just like I had heard their truth in theirs. And I knew exactly where to start. I pulled out the old camcorder tapes my dad used to take when I was a kid. They were stored in a box I had taken with me years ago when I moved out. Forgotten relics of birthday parties, school plays, and Sunday hikes. For days I watched those tapes. Not just for nostalgia. I was looking for patterns, clues, evidence of how the shift had happened, how I had gone from being their pride to being their placeholder. And there it was. On my 8th birthday, I blew out candles and looked to my dad. He didn't look back. He was already pointing the camera at my mom, who was feeding cake to a neighbor's baby. In a school play video, I was center stage, saying my lines. But the camera zoomed in on a crying Evan in the audience, who wasn't even 2 yet. And in every tape after that, less and less of me. I decided to make a short film, nothing dramatic, just a quiet montage. Clips of me growing up, slowly fading into the background. My smile becoming tighter, my eyes dimmer. Moments of effort with no applause. Loyalty met with indifference. I titled it, "The Son You Forgot." But that was only phase 1. Next, I requested a DNA test, not to prove anything to myself, but to make a point. I didn't share the results publicly. Instead, I mailed a printed copy to my parents, sealed inside a clean envelope with no note. Just one line on the front. In case you ever forget who I am. Then I reached out to Carla again, my godmother, the only one who had ever spoken to me like I mattered. I asked if she'd be willing to meet me for a project I was working on. She didn't hesitate. I sat her down in front of a camera and asked her to tell me what she remembered about my adoption, her version, the one no one else ever dared speak aloud. She told the whole story again, but this time on record. How devastated my parents had been, how they almost gave me back, how they never seemed to see me, even when I tried to shine. She teared up halfway through. I always thought, she said, that maybe they'd come around, that maybe Evan would grow up and see you for the brother you were. But now, I think you're the only one who ever tried. Her words stayed with me, so did her voice. I layered her interview over the montage, her soft, cracking voice narrating my silent erasure. I kept it quiet, poetic, like a eulogy for someone still alive. The final scene was a photo, me, age 6, sitting between my parents, holding their hands, smiling with all my heart. Then, a slow fade to black. But I wasn't going to release it online. No hashtags, no public shame. I wanted this to be personal, intimate, undeniable. So I burned the film onto 3 DVDs, one for each of them. My mom, my dad, my brother. Each disc labeled with nothing but a date, the day of that Thanksgiving dinner. I mailed them with no return address, no letter, no signature, just the story they helped write, played back to them with brutal honesty. I didn't know if they would watch it, but deep down, I hoped they would, because it was only the beginning. It took a week, 7 days of silence before I heard anything. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text from my dad. It was short, cold, calculated. "We received your package. What's the point of this?" Not hi, not we're sorry, not we didn't know. Just, what's the point? I didn't respond. That was the point. 2 days later, my mom called. I let it ring. She tried again, then again. On the 5th try, I finally answered. Her voice cracked. "Honey, what are you trying to do to us?" I almost laughed. "Do to you?" "You watched it?" I asked, calm and steady. She hesitated. "We did. It was cruel, hurtful." "No," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. What was hurtful was a lifetime of being invisible in my own family. The film just showed you the mirror. She started crying, and for a split second, I felt a flicker of guilt. But it passed, because now they were finally feeling what I had felt for years. Then came Evan. Of course, Evan. He didn't call. He texted. Typical. "Nice movie. You really are dramatic, huh?" I ignored him. He sent another. "You were always the charity case. You think this little sob story makes you special?" I wanted to rage, to tear him apart with everything I had bottled up, but instead, I replied with 3 words. "Check your email." Attached was a scanned copy of our parents' will, because I had gotten my hands on it. Carla had helped. She'd heard whispers from a mutual friend, and after some digging, I found a copy. And guess what? Everything was going to Evan. The house, the retirement accounts, even the lake cabin I'd helped rebuild with Dad during college summers. There was a small clause at the bottom. "Jason will receive a framed family photo and the keepsake quilt from childhood." A damn quilt. Like I was some exchange student who passed through. So I sent it to Evan. No explanation, no commentary. Let the truth hit harder than any insult ever could. Then, I started phase 3. I uploaded the video, not to YouTube, not to the world. I uploaded it privately and shared it with only one group, our extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the same people who had smiled at me over Thanksgiving turkey and let Evan's words pass like a joke. The title of the email was simple. Since no one said anything that night, I will. Within 24 hours, my inbox exploded. Some wrote long, emotional apologies. Some said they had no idea how things had been. Some were furious at my parents. But the most unexpected message came from Aunt Linda, my dad's sister. She'd always been distant, reserved. Her email read, "Jason, I always suspected they favored Evan, but I didn't know how deep it ran. I wish I had spoken up. I'm sorry. And for what it's worth, your video changed how I see our family." One by one, the narrative began to shift. I was no longer the overly sensitive one. I was the truthful one. the one who had been silent for too long, and finally spoke. My mom tried to call again. This time I answered. "I didn't know about the will," she whispered. "I thought your father said it would be fair." "Fair?" I interrupted. "A photo and a quilt? Is that your idea of fair?" More silence. Then I asked the question I had been dying to ask for years. "Why did you keep me if you never really wanted me?" She didn't answer. And in that silence, I found everything I needed. Sometimes the deepest cuts come from the ones who say they love you. But silence isn't strength, and truth has its own kind of power. If you've ever been cast aside or made to feel like you didn't belong, share your story below. Someone out there needs to hear it. After the storm I'd unleashed, the silence from my parents stretched for days. No more texts, no more calls. Evan, of course, went quiet too. That smug little prince had finally seen that not every stage belonged to him. I thought I'd feel satisfied. I didn't. What I felt was something colder, clearer. Focus. The kind that comes when you're done waiting for closure and decide to make it yourself. Christmas was coming, and for the first time in years my parents asked if I'd be coming home. Not with warmth, not with joy. Just a stiff email from my dad. "We'd like to talk, face to face." It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. And somehow, I accepted. I didn't go to be reconciled. I went to finish this. To stand in that house one last time, not as their son, but as the man they helped shape with their neglect. I prepared carefully. I printed copies of the will, highlighted in yellow where they'd cut me out. I brought a tablet with the short film, just in case they tried to say they didn't understand it. And I brought Carla's voice recording on a USB drive, because sometimes the truth hits harder when it's said by someone else, someone they trusted. But most importantly, I brought my calm. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to make them feel what they had spent decades avoiding. Accountability. On Christmas Eve, I parked outside the house I grew up in. The lights were up. The tree glowed in the window. Everything looked the same, too much the same, like the past hadn't happened. Like this house was still a sanctuary, not a stage for betrayal. I rang the bell. My mom opened the door. She looked thinner, paler. She smiled nervously, like she was hosting a guest, not welcoming a son. My dad stood stiffly behind her. Evan wasn't in sight. We sat at the dining table, the same one from that Thanksgiving disaster. Same tablecloth, same centerpiece. Only now, there were cracks beneath it all. My dad cleared his throat. "We've had time to reflect," he began. "And we think it's time to clear the air." Clear the air? Like this was some misunderstanding? I slid the folder with the will across the table. "I just want to hear you say it," I said quietly. "That this was intentional. That you chose Evan over me." My mom flinched. My dad shifted in his seat. Neither spoke. So I pressed play on Carla's voice. Her calm, sorrowful words filled the dining room. The night they almost gave me back. The years of subtle rejection. The heartbreak I never had the words for until now. My mother started to cry. But I didn't comfort her. This time her tears weren't mine to carry. And then, as if on cue, Evan walked in. He froze when he saw me, smirked. "You really had to drag this into Christmas, huh?" I stood up, looked him in the eyes. "No, you dragged this into Thanksgiving. I'm just finishing what you started." The town hall was packed that evening, residents clutching fold-out chairs, murmuring over the controversy that had gripped the neighborhood for weeks. Sarah stood at the back, clutching a small folder to her chest, her fingers trembling not from fear, but from focus. In the front row sat Edith, cool and composed in her pearls, flanked by board members and a few reporters. She didn't know what was coming. Not yet. The moderator tapped the mic, calling the meeting to order. The room quieted as Edith rose to give her usual budget summary, slipping easily into her practiced voice. "And thanks to our recent efforts," she said, "we've secured a long-term development partnership that will elevate our community to... I'd like to speak." Sarah's voice cut through the room like a blade. Heads turned, whispers flickered like sparks. The moderator blinked, surprised, but gestured to the podium. Edith's face stiffened as Sarah walked up, shoulders back, folder in hand, the light casting shadows across her cheekbones. "I've lived in this town since I was a child," Sarah began, her voice steady. "And I've seen how certain voices are always silenced, especially when they ask the wrong questions." She opened the folder, pulling out photos, screenshots of Edith's private messages to board members, leaked documents from the HOA's internal evaluations, signed approval letters for developments no resident had agreed to. "For the past year," Sarah continued, "you've been lied to. Your money has funded a deal that pushes low-income residents out while lining the pockets of a woman who built this community's trust, only to betray it." Gasps echoed. Someone dropped a pen. Edith stood abruptly. "This is nonsense. Fabrications." "Really?" Sarah turned to the projector. She clicked the remote, and the wall behind them lit up with Edith's emails. Emails where she referred to elderly residents as expendable, mocked Sarah's mother's dementia, and strategized how to bypass community voting procedures. The room exploded. "Is this true?" one man shouted. "We trusted you," cried a woman near the back. Edith stammered, searching for an exit not just from the room, but from the truth. And then came the final blow. Sarah stepped aside. From the hallway, her cousin walked in, carrying a box. Inside were checks, uncashed, HOA refunds, supposedly reissued after the fire, all addressed to families like hers, but never delivered. Edith went pale. The moderator leaned into the mic. "We'll be suspending Mrs. Hawthorne pending investigation. An emergency vote will follow." Sarah didn't smile. Not yet. She looked straight into Edith's eyes, green meeting green, old pain against cold pride, and said, just loud enough for her to hear, "You buried my mother's ashes under a condo plan. Now let's see how your legacy survives the truth." For the first time in years, the house was quiet. Not the tense, breath-holding kind of quiet that had haunted Erin every time she visited, but a real silence. The kind that comes after a storm has passed and the sky dares to be blue again. She stood in her mother's now vacant bedroom, the air thick with lavender and old memories, and opened the window. A breeze slipped in, gentle and free. The days following the court hearing had moved fast. Mark had gone back to Arizona in silence, his lawyer slumped and bitter. Erin didn't speak to him, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. The restraining order had been granted swiftly. The estate executor had reinstated her mother's original will. Mark was cut out completely, as was his wife, Angela. Every fabricated signature, every altered document had been exposed. The judge's ruling was clear: fraud and coercion. And with that, the claws he'd sunk into their mother's life were ripped away. Erin wasn't looking for vengeance anymore. What she craved now was peace and clarity. She spent the next few weeks slowly going through the house, not just sorting the physical, old clothes, dusty photo albums, love letters from a father long gone, but also sorting the grief. It had lived inside her for so long, she barely knew where she ended and it began. But now, with every box packed and every drawer emptied, it grew a little quieter. She took down the mirror in the front hall, the one her mother always avoided after the illness set in. Behind it was a list, scrawled in her mom's gentle script, her reminders, though Erin suspected they were more like hopes. Be kind, stay sharp, protect your girls, remember who you are. Erin traced the ink with her finger, tears welling up. Her mother had left more than just a house. She'd left a legacy, one Erin was now determined to honor, not just legally, but emotionally. The biggest decision came when Erin chose not to sell the house. Everyone advised her to. It was too full of ghosts, too full of bad memories. But Erin didn't see it that way. The bad parts had been aired out like mold in the attic. What remained was the frame her mother built, strong, lived in, and worth reclaiming. She renovated the kitchen first. Her mother had always hated the old cabinets, but never got around to changing them. Erin picked a soft sage green, the same color as her mother's favorite cardigan. She added wide windows to let the light pour in. Her daughters, Katie and Mia, helped paint the walls. For the first time, the home felt like theirs, not Mark's, not haunted, just real. And slowly, Erin rebuilt the traditions. Sunday dinners came back, but this time with laughter and no judgment. She invited her sister Claire often, and they talked openly about their childhood, the wounds, the silence. They cried. They forgave. They moved forward. Mark? He faded from their lives like a dark chapter in a thick book. His calls stopped. His name came up less and less. The court still held him accountable, financial penalties, restitution. But Erin didn't follow it obsessively. That part of the story was over. What mattered now was what she chose to build in the wake of it. The days after the court ruling were quiet, but not in the way silence had once haunted her. This time, the stillness in her home was peaceful. No more whispers of betrayal behind closed doors. No more walking on eggshells. No more pretending. Helen found herself waking up with a sense of purpose again. She enrolled in grief counseling, not just for Emily's death, but for the decade of emotional abuse she'd never allowed herself to fully name. Week by week, she peeled back the layers. There was pain, yes, but there was also validation. Her pain wasn't imaginary. Her rage hadn't made her a monster. It had saved her. One rainy Thursday afternoon, she stood in front of Emily's grave with a single white rose. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner," she whispered, tears slipping down her face, mixing with the drizzle. "But I did it. We did it. He won't hurt anyone again." The guilt didn't vanish. It morphed into something else, something quieter, a reminder of what mattered and what had been lost. Back at home, she began turning Emily's room into a reading sanctuary, one that any child could enjoy. It would be part of the foundation she was starting in Emily's name, the Emily Claire Project. A safe space for foster kids to report abuse anonymously, with legal support and therapy included. It wasn't just a tribute. It was her fight continuing in a different form. Her friends returned too, those she thought she'd pushed away forever. Carla brought over casseroles and gossip. Lisa, once cautious and distant, offered to help fundraise for the foundation. Even Mrs. Adler from next door started dropping by again with her cinnamon tea and gentle presence. Little by little, Helen rejoined life. There were moments she missed him. Rick. Or rather, the man she thought he had been. Those memories were the most treacherous, dressed in charm and laughter, hiding the rot underneath. But she had learned to look closer now, to trust herself. Months later, on what would have been Emily's 12th birthday, Helen hosted a memorial at the local library. Children from the foster network came, some with new families, some still waiting. She read aloud Emily's favorite book, The Tale of the Brave Little Owl. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steadier with each word. When she reached the last page, she looked out and saw a dozen little faces staring up at her, safe, for now, because of her. After the memorial, a girl named Ava tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Helen," she said shyly, "are you going to write another book?" Helen blinked. "Another? You wrote that one, right?" Ava pointed to a copy of The Brave Little Owl sitting on the table. Helen smiled, kneeling. "No, sweetheart," she said, "but maybe I will." As Ava skipped away, Helen turned to the library window. Outside, the sky was pale blue, stretching wide and clear. For the first time in years, She didn't feel haunted. She felt whole. She hadn't just taken her life back. She'd rebuilt it from the wreckage. Stronger, kinder, fiercer. And though revenge had fueled her fire, it wasn't what sustained her. What sustained her was love. And that was something Rick could never take from her again.